And some of you maybe haven't done a lot of awareness through movement lessons. So as a way of helping you navigate through the lessons, some things are intentionally left quite unspecified. Nothing said about, so for in this instance, nothing is said, nothing is specified in terms of how you should sit. It's just, please sit on the floor. And I think that's intentional in this pursuit. And sometimes things are very, very specified, so much to the point as, no, don't do that, or only do it this way. So this is an instance of not specified. Now, imagine yourself sitting right in the center of a clock face. So there you are. X marks the spot. There you are, sitting on there. And 12 o'clock is on the floor in front of you. And 6 o'clock is on the floor behind you. So could you imagine that? Now, one further thing to add for those of you who haven't had a lot of awareness through movement experience, just because you've decided to sit on the floor in this particular way at this particular moment, it doesn't mean in the next few moments you can't sit in a different way. Yeah? Understood? So you can change. Yeah. Please start to direct your head towards 12 o'clock on the floor in front of you. And then return. And do that many, many, many times. Attentively. And one of the first things that you can attend to is, where have you put 12 o'clock on the floor? Is it really very close to you? Very close to the front of your pelvis, or is it far away? Where is 12 o'clock? Because if you're directing your head in that direction, it's going to make a difference to how you move yourself. And given that it's a mental construct of yours, it's just something in your imagination, there's nothing stopping you from taking that 12 and putting it somewhere else where you think, oh, I think I could reach it there far more easily. But that doesn't mean you're able to put 12 o'clock anywhere you like. Because if you're sitting on the center of the clock and 12 o'clock is directly ahead of you, you can't put it to the left or to the right because 1 o'clock and 11 o'clock are there. It has to be in a really very particular direction relative to the front of your body. It has to be. Otherwise, it's a different hour. It's a minute to 12 or a minute after 12. But you can certainly vary the distance of 12 from your body. Now, keep doing what you're doing and expand your awareness to include how you're shaping yourself to get your head moving in the direction of 12 o'clock. How do you shape your body? The neck, the chest, the abdomen, the back of the chest, the spine. Notice whether you've chosen to involve your arms or not to involve your arms. Because that is a choice that's open to you. Excuse me. And if you wanted to make it a little easier for yourself, maybe you could make a different choice with your legs. Now, the repetitions that you're doing are for a very particular purpose, you know that. To give yourself the opportunity to sense again and again how you're doing, how you're performing your intention, to get clearer on what you're doing, and then to make modifications that you feel for yourself make it more pleasant to do, easier to do, more comfortable to do. And that's for a very particular reason, because perception takes a while to generate. Perception requires moving yourself over a period of time until you get clear about what's going on. Now, one more thing. As you're directing your head towards 12, where are you thinking? Because the head is quite a large sphere. What part of the head are you thinking of? Is it the forehead? Is it the tip of the nose? Is it the chin? Is it the left cheek? Is it the left ear? What, in your image of yourself, what constitutes head? I mean, the back of your head is still your head. How many of you are thinking of directing the back of your head towards 12? Anybody? Any takers? No. Okay. That was a good guess. But does it change your perception of the movement if you think of directing your head towards 12? Intentionally thinking like that, conceiving of the movement like that. Or does it make a difference for some of you if you think of directing your chin towards 12? And that might create quite a different experience in your neck. So words are very useful, but at the same time, words are very loose. They're loose, which leaves you open to interpreting them in a particular way that may be of benefit to you or not. Don't know. The only way you'll know whether it's of benefit or not is if you change the way you think about that word and you go, now I'll direct my cheek towards 12. Oh, that's what that feels like. Now I'll direct my forehead towards 12. Oh, that's what that feels like. Now I'll direct my right eye towards 12. That's what that feels like. And out of those variety of experiences, you start to become quite knowledgeable about which ways of moving to your head are more to your liking and which are not. Okay, please let that be. Rest yourself completely. Now reflect for a moment. How many times did you change your legs during that time? Did your legs continuously stay in the same position, or did you vary them? And if you varied the position of your legs, did you notice what difference did it make? Now please roll to one side, come up to sitting. And imagine yourself sitting in the center of a clock. 12 o'clock's directly in front and 6 o'clock is directly behind you. But this time let's specify the position a little bit more. Could you sit in a way where you could lean on the floor behind you with your hands? And now start to direct your head towards 6 o'clock behind you. And then return. And do that many, many times. And with each repetition, focus in on the experience of moving yourself. Not only just to simply sense what that experience is, but to actually become more and more familiar with how you're moving yourself in order to perform this intent. So you're sitting, you're definitely leaning on the floor through your hands. And you're taking your head towards 6 and returning. Now, notice, as your head goes backwards, what happens with your breathing? Is there something that you can do with the way you move your trunk that would leave your breathing a little more free to do its thing? Now, just take your head backwards towards 6 and return it to the starting place. Just to 6 and then return to starting. 6 and return to starting. And this business of leaning on the floor with your hands, what does it mean to lean on the floor with your hands? Does it mean to lean with the palm of the hand? Does it mean to lean with the fist, the back of the hand? Should the fingers be pointing forwards? Should they be pointing sideways, backwards? What is that business about leaning on the floor? And is there a way of leaning on the floor that would more enable you to take the head backwards towards 6? With your hands, not your elbows, your hands. Now, keep doing what you're doing. And you're also leaning on the floor with another part of yourself quite firmly, and that is your pelvis. As you take your hand, as you take your head backwards, does the pelvis change the way it leans on the floor? Do you experience some change in contact? Maybe a different part of the pelvis presses, or maybe the same part presses, but more. let that be rest again, please. So these little periods between movement sessions, you can rest your attention, you can rest the physical body, you can kind of refresh yourself, and you can also reflect. You can reflect on what you just did, what you just experienced, and then you can also reconsider. You can reconsider, if I was to do that again, would I do it differently based on my reflections? So there's a lot that can be happening in these so-called rest periods. Anything from having a quick little nano nap to really being still mentally quite engaged and reflecting, reconsidering. So don't think of rests as just being this single thing that you do. It's quite a complex activity, resting. Please come up to sit. And this time, as you're sitting with your pelvis in the middle of a clock, could you lean on the floor behind you with your hands? And now let's get even a bit more specific with the positioning of the legs. So bend your legs and touch the soles of the feet together. And now re-establish those 2 hours on the clock. 12 o'clock is on the floor in front of you. 6 o'clock is on the floor behind you. Please begin to move yourself in such a way that you experience your pelvis rolling in the direction of 12 o'clock and then return to the center of the clock, just that. Now, as you make that movement, notice how there's a constant change of contact between the bottom of your pelvis and the floor. That experience of a constant change in contact is what you perceive to be movement. That's what movement feels like when you're moving across the ground. There's a constant change of contact. Keep doing this movement and begin to make little adjustments for yourself. So, for instance, how close to the pelvis or how far from the pelvis do the feet need to be for you to experience the movements of the pelvis becoming a little bit more supple, a little easier? Whoa. So too close, and it's like the pelvis gets stopped pretty quickly, like a road barrier. Oof. Too far, and returning to the center of the clock becomes tricky. And then do the same exploration for your hands. Too close to you, and you kind of get squeezed in by your arms. Too far, and it feels like hard work to roll the pelvis forward. So you're looking for a place that really affords you motion. And depending on your background, you might need to give up particular ideas of how the feet and legs should be, because there are movement systems that tell you exactly how the legs should be in order to do something like this. Well, here it's a little bit different. Here you find where the legs need to be at this particular time to let you perform your intention with ease and without strain. Stop a moment and just remain sitting. You can sit any way you like. You don't have to lean on the floor anymore. Just stop for a moment. Okay, and return to that position, whatever you found worked for you, where the feet are, where the hands are, return to that place. And now do the opposite with your pelvis. Roll your pelvis backwards in the direction of 6. And really attend to, quite carefully, the experience of rolling your pelvis backwards. Notice what parts of your pelvis come more and more into contact with the floor as you roll it backwards. And then as you reverse directions, what changes? It's like being in a car and you're driving along and you're seeing the scenery change. You know you're moving because the scenery is changing. Same thing here. You know you're moving because the sensations in the flesh of your buttocks, in the bones surrounding your buttocks, the sensations are changing. Now, please combine those two directions. Roll your pelvis towards 6, return to the center, roll your pelvis towards 12, return to the center. And hopefully you've become a little bit more acquainted with the movement of your pelvis relative to the floor, and which will allow you now to spread your attention a little bit further afield and notice, what are you doing with your trunk? Do you tilt your trunk in a particular way? Do you shape your trunk in a particular way? Does it become curved more in one place and not so curved in another? What is it that you do? And then what is it that you could do with your trunk to make the rolling of the pelvis a little more free? Please stop, pause, lie on your back or on your side, or whatever position you like. Now, as you're lying there, just reflect. When you were moving your pelvis 12 and 6, in which directions were your head moving? In which directions was your head moving? Was it moving? Now, we know from the science of anatomy that the head and the pelvis are strongly connected via the spine. There is a structural connection between the two. So, structurally speaking, when the pelvis moves, the motion can be communicated up to the head and vice versa. But that's just simply structurally speaking. What we do in our real movement is something completely different. Please come up to sitting again. Sit in that same fashion, the soles of the feet together, the legs bent, leaning on the floor behind you with your hands. Imagine that clock. You're sitting in the middle of the clock, and begin to incline your head forwards towards 12, return to the middle, and then backwards towards 6. And detect, and I'm using that word deliberately, detect, if there is a relationship for you between the movement of the head and the pelvis. And if you can detect a relationship, make that relationship clear for yourself in your mind. Whatever that relationship is, just make it clear. So as you take your head backwards towards 6, does the pelvis go towards 6? As you take your head towards 12, does the pelvis go towards 12? And if that's what you're experiencing, that means you're using your trunk in a very particular way, and there's nothing good or bad about it. That's just the way you're using your trunk at the moment. As you take your head towards 6, does your pelvis go towards 12? As you take your head towards 12, does your pelvis go towards 6? And again, there's nothing good or bad or right or wrong about it. It's just a different way of enacting that intention. Now, keep doing what you're doing for just a little longer, and make sure that you are intentionally moving your head through space, and that's the part of yourself that you're thinking of moving, and the pelvis is following however it follows. So you're intentionally moving your head, and whatever happens, happens. And now switch that completely over. Intentionally move the pelvis and notice, how does the head move? As the pelvis goes to 12, the head goes to, as the pelvis goes to 6, the head goes to, and one of the answers could be the head stays in the middle. It just stays in the center of the clock. In other words, one of the first things that is very useful for you to know is how you move yourself to start with. What home base is. And then from there, you can begin to intentionally explore different coordinations. So as the ancient Greeks in Delphi wrote up on the wall, some person graffitied that wall, "Know thyself." Can you imagine some dude with a cap coming up there on that Greek wall going, "Hey brother, just know thyself. It's the way to enlightenment." Yeah, I reckon that would be a previous incarnation of Moshe Feldenkrais. But anyway, could be but yeah. Know thyself. So that is really the first step. Yeah. What am I doing now? Okay, let that be. Pause for a little while again. Rest yourself, reflect, reconsider, refresh. All very good capital R words, don't you think? Yeah. So now we're moving into the very last portion of the lesson, which a few more things now start to become specified. And as you go more and more through the training, you'll realize that these very specified positionings are called constraints. In other words, you maintain a particular configuration and then you move the rest of yourself around it. And that has the potential of creating a new understanding, a new experience based on, yeah, that's what it's about. So please come up to sit again. Arrange your legs like before, your hands like before. Now, this time, could you intentionally roll your pelvis to 12 and take your head to 6? And then return. Just do that several times, just so that you can make it more and more familiar to yourself. Please do not go to end range. Just make the movement enough so that you know you've done it. That's sufficient. Really is. Pelvis to 12, head to 6. And what you'll notice when you arrive at that destination is that the chin is quite far away from the throat. It's not where it was a moment ago. Now, the next time that you're there, pelvis 12, head 6, please keep the head at 6 and roll the pelvis 12, 6, 12, 6. Stop. Stop. Again, roll the pelvis to 12 o'clock, which is in front of you. Take the head to 6 o'clock. Stay there. Really become acquainted. Where is your face pointing in relationship to this room? Where is the chin, the back of the head? Where is that location? Maintain that location and positioning of the head as you roll your pelvis 12 and 6. You can stick out your tongue if you like, it's okay. Sometimes it helps. I'm serious, I'm not joking. Now, for the head to be in that position, that means the neck has to be configured in a certain way and the shoulders need to be in a certain way, but the rest of you, everything underneath that, could possibly move. Possibly something in your chest. Yeah. Now, pause, let that be. Stay sitting for a moment. Now, as I'm watching the sea of heads throughout the room, I can see heads rising from the floor a little higher and dropping from the floor. That's fine. That's absolutely fine. But some of you, as you take your pelvis forwards and backs, you're going a little bit like this, which means you're actually doing not what's being asked for. And that's where your awareness is really important. To actually know that you're doing that which is intended. Not because the teacher says so, but because that's what needs to happen in your everyday life. You know, if you want to say to somebody, "I love you," but you slap them on the face, it doesn't kind of work. It just doesn't. So very often we intend, we want to do something, but we do it in such a way that it kind of maybe sabotages us a little bit, or makes it difficult, makes us stiff by the end of it. And what we really want to do is to act in a certain way that everything corresponds to the intention, everything. Which means you don't do any harm to yourself, psychologically, physically, whatever, because everything is like aligned with your intent. Does that make sense? So this little simple thing is all about that big thing. Yeah. And that's why he uses movement. It's just this silly little thing, but it's about a really big thing. Please lean on the floor behind you with your hands, put the soles of your feet together. Now this time, do the complete opposite. Roll your pelvis backwards towards 6 and take your head towards 12, which is in front of you, and then return to the center of the clock. And for many of you, you'll notice that your chin comes closer to your throat or closer to the top of your chest. Please remember that it's absolutely of no importance how far or how much you move. What really is of importance is that you're clear that you're doing what you're intending to do. Pelvis towards 6, head towards 12. And the next time you arrive at that destination, big or small as it is, stay there. Feel the position of the head. Become acquainted with that position. Where is it in space? Where is it relative to the rest of you? Keep the head there and roll your pelvis 12-6, 12-6. And the head bobbing up and down, higher, lower is fine. But you are maintaining a very particular inclination of the head. And it could be that for some of you, you start to realize, oh, I can keep the head in that position and that part of me can now move. And then that part of me can move. In other words, you'll start to liberate more and more of yourself as you go along. And that's called learning through experience. It's the whole foundation of everything that we've learned in most of our bodily life. Let that be. Roll onto your back. Pause. Roll to one side, come up to sitting. Lean on the floor behind you with your hands. Have your soles of the feet together. And now, please roll your pelvis 12-6, 12-6. And notice what you spontaneously do with your head. In other words, what you do with your head without thinking about it. And is it something that is different from before? That's the question. It might not be. It might be. Now, your hands stay leaning on the floor behind you. They never leave the floor. They never leave the floor. They never leave the floor. But you just lean on them. Lean on them. And switch that around now. Intentionally move your head. 12-6, 12-6. And notice what you spontaneously do with your pelvis. Do you know that you stop leaning on the floor?
What's that?
Do you know that you stop leaning on the floor?
Yeah.
Yeah, keep leaning on the floor. That's a very different movement. If you lift your hands off, it's very different. Stay leaning on the floor. Yeah. Just feel how you're lifting your weight out of your hands. Don't. Okay, good. Now, stop a moment. And whoever is close by you, could you please pair up with them? So one person will be doing this movement and the other person will be assisting. All right. So I know for some people, getting a clear sense of where the head is in space can be quite tricky. So this is an opportunity for you to get a sense of where your head is in space through someone's touch. Yeah? Can I work with you for a little bit? So if you're sitting on the floor and you're doing that 12-6 movement with your pelvis, yeah? So intentionally moving your pelvis. Go ahead. There we go. So I watch my partner move. I see what their head does. Okay. And then I just put my hands. You see, this little part of the hand was designed by the creator for them to go around the ears. So you put your hands there and you just literally follow your partner as best you can without interfering with them, so that they can get a clearer sense through contact what their head is doing. Yeah? Make sense? And stop. And then do the same thing with your hands here. Find the top of their hips. There. And then off they go again. Move your pelvis this time. Yeah, there we go. Pelvis. Pelvis, 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 pelvis. Elvis is not dead. Elvis is not dead. What? I'm not doing anything. I think I am actually influencing you a little bit, but that's all right. Yeah, she's influenced. Yeah. So that's all. In other words, very often through our contact with objects and people, we find out more about ourselves because it's very tactile, it's very sensate, yeah? Rather than just that part of you there and the pelvis, with which most of us have already forgotten because biology was like 30 years ago and you only ever saw pictures. No one ever got you to contact your own pelvis. So pelvis for a lot of people is like, huh? So we'll get to know the pelvis, all right? Okay, so please pair up and just do those two simple things and be quite patient with